What's up, everybody? It's Andre Iguodala from the Golden State Warriors here. It's my pleasure, on behalf of New Amendment and the Point Forward podcast, to invite you all out on Friday, March 10th, to Beyond the Big Ten live recording taking place at Over Under Sports Bar in Lincoln Park, Chicago. That's Friday, March 10th at Over Under from 3 to 7 p.m. Look forward to catching y'all there.
Hello and welcome into the Nittany Gritty, a podcast brought to you by the good folks at New Amendment. I am your host, Jon Sauber, joined as always by Penn State legend Tim Frazier. Tim, one of the last people from Penn State to play in the NCAA tournament. Seems like that might be changing soon.
Hopefully, that's the plan. And obviously a hell of a week for these guys, and they did what we wanted them to do. And I'm sure every Penn State fan and beat writer and ex-player wanted them to do, and they came out and did what they needed to do. So. I see them. They got to be in. It's time to change the narrative of the tournament. It's been 10 years now. Obviously, Lamar's team would have got in, but obviously COVID rules. But at least now we'll have somebody that's officially in, and we can go from there.
Yeah, and it's an interesting discussion to have, right? Because I think there's some differing opinions here on whether or not they are in right now, what they need to do, but. We'll get down that road here soon. But first, like how they got here, the X's and O's of what happened this past week, pretty insane. It was, you and I were on here talking about they had to win the last two. Rutgers was devastating. We didn't know how they would turn up. We wouldn't know, if they were going to show up against Northwestern. You and I both said we thought they'd win. But at the end of the day, you never really know how a team responds. And they responded exactly how you and I said they would. Right, Cam Winter comes up huge, hits a game winner in overtime to win 68-65 against Northwestern, and then at home another game winner for Cam Winter. This time a layup to beat Maryland by 1. But let's start with Northwestern here. It didn't feel like they were going to win that game until it got into probably the last 2 minutes. They set up an ATO for Andrew Funk to get an open three, and he did. And I honestly thought that one was going down. It bounces out, goes to overtime. And then getting the game winner there. That can't be easy to have that clean of a look in regulation, have it miss, and then be like, oh, now we got to play overtime after that shit, right? Like you had the opportunity. It was there. Is exactly what you wanted. And I thought the way they responded to missing a game winner was perfect, essentially.
Yeah, well, what you've noticed from this team, especially this last week, and even the last, every time they get down in the hole, they're resilient. They fight back. They change the narrative of whatever's going on with them. They, like you said, they drop a game against Wisconsin early in the year. They bounce back. They do the things that they need to do to bounce back to keep themselves alive. Obviously we wish it was easier where we could just kind of see them go smoothly through. But this team is built on resiliency and being tough and being able to fight back when they get knocked down. And they did that in Northwestern. It's like you get to a great shot in regulation, able to knock it down. Funk, I'm sure, wanted to hit it, and everybody wanted Funk to hit it, but he didn't. We were able to get it back and basically tune back in your mind for overtime, and that's what they did, man. But we can't go past I think it was Kabajai with the huge rebound, right?
No, it was Evan Mahaffey. Evan Mahaffey with this rebound was
yes.
No business getting this rebound, right? And then he's a freshman, right? This is a 19-year-old kid, hauls in the rebound. There are 5 seconds left in overtime, and I'm panicking in that situation, point blank, period. At 19 years old, I'm not handling that well, right? I'm completely folding under pressure. He brings the rebound in, looks for an open. I think he initially looks at Jalen Pickett behind him in the corner, realizes it's covered, hits the skip pass to the opposite wing to Andrew Funk, and easily the funniest part of the video. I don't know. So I was watching it, trying to paint the picture of it for a story that I did, and I watched it a bunch. The funniest thing that happens is the pass gets to Funk, and before it's even in his hands, you see Micah Shrewsbury point, right? He's immediately pointing at Cam Winter in the corner. Even if Funk wanted to shoot that shot, he was not shooting that with his coach pointing directly to the next guy, right? And he swung it one more to Cam Winter, who found the laces, so to speak, and took the shot and hit it. And I talked to Cam about that shot 2 days later, right? And kind of what he was feeling. And usually you hear guys talk about I just wanted to make sure I got it up. I wanted to make sure this, that. And his response to my question was even calm, right? It was yeah, I knew I had a bunch of time, so I just wanted to make sure I was squared up and ready to go, right? Again, very much not how I would handle that kind of situation. I think that, and it didn't feel like, a lot of times you talk to enough people and doing the job that I do, like you can kind of see through when someone's bullshitting you. He was not. Like that was all, like he was genuinely like, yeah, no, I knew I had time and I knew I could get this to go. And so I took my time and I did it. And I know that's oversimplifying, but I think having that kind of moxie, right, and to not have those nerves bother you in that situation, it says a lot about him, because he wasn't playing well at the beginning of this year. Yeah. And now he's the most important player on the team the last 2 games.
Yeah, I will say, too, as far as like last second shots go, what I've been taught, what I've learned throughout, my pro career and from great guys that have made big time shots, they always say shoot your shot. At the end of the day, you think sometimes we rush and we change the shot to beat the time, but most of the time we have enough time. And at the end of the day, you have a better shot if you just shoot your regular shot. For the most guys, there are some guys that have very slow releases. But for most of us, if we shoot our regular shot, we're going to get it off in time. And when you do that, more than likely, that's going to go in than a change in the shot, trying to get it off in time real quick. So credit to him. And again, I wanted to make sure I got that rebound piece in, because, that those are the little things that make you championship teams and make you NCAA tournament teams, because he could have easily just said, oh, we missed the 3, that was it, you know what I mean? But he went hard for that rebound. He was able to get it. He was poised enough to pass it out as well to it for a swing and get a 3. So, but for Winter, man, that's just a hell of a week, man. As a player, this is the type of the things you dream about, making 2-game winners in the same week, and especially in college, how much it means and how much these 2 games meant. His 2 games winners is something that's going to go down for a long time. People are always going to remember that. And I think that's part of the reason why he was able to make Player of the Week in the Big Ten, too.
Yeah, and honestly, like, I think people in the long run may forget about the Northwestern one, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that's kind of reasonable, because the next one was even crazier, right? And just real quick on that Northwestern game, too, like, you mentioned like shooting his shot from like, making sure he's shooting in the flow of it and everything and not like rushing it or anything. There's also the standpoint of shooting his shot from like what he likes, right? And it's easy for a guy who he's not necessarily a great 3-point shooter. He's a good 3-point shooter, better off the catch in those situations. He loves, 16 to 18 feet out. He loves those shots. I give him a lot of credit for not taking this sort of dribble in, right, and trying to be like, okay, I'm more comfortable here, because then you're allowing the defense to close out, right? You're giving them the time to recover, and maybe those 4 seconds you had are now 2 seconds, but also there's a guy closing out, so you gotta pump fake and hope that they fly by, and if they don't, then you're stuck. And even if they do, it's like, okay, do you have enough time to get it? There was a shot presented to him. He was comfortable taking it, even though it isn't the ideal place for him to be on the court. Like I said, he's a perfectly fine shooter from deep. He's made plenty of those shots, especially over the last few weeks. But to not, to make the right decision, essentially is what I'm saying, right? To not try and make it, to not pass up. Sometimes perfect is the enemy of great, as the saying goes. Yep. He didn't allow that to happen, right? He didn't chase perfection. He knew he had a great shot, and he knew he could hit it. And he did. And Sunday was very different. That was a game I said I didn't think they would win against Northwestern. I turned to Daniel Gallen, who covers Penn State for Lions 24/7 on press row with about 12 minutes left. I said, this bad boy's over. And I started writing, right? Like it was like...
Yeah, get a head start.
Yeah, right. Like I'm trying to go home. It's a Sunday. It was at like 1:15 at that point, 1:30. And I was like, listen, it was a fun year covering this team, but like this seems like it's it, right? And they went out without a swing, and then they very much started swinging. And to their benefit too, Maryland kind of, no pun intended, turtled up a little bit at the end. They tried to kill that time, and they did kill some time. I don't think it went as well as they wanted to. And just to lay out the scene on that one. Jalen Pickett has an opportunity to take a shot or pass it down at the end of the game. Again, his ideal shot about 14 feet. Yep. Pass it out to Seth Lundy, who is at the top of the key. I believe he's coming off a screen at that point, and he squares up. And again, he was not shooting all that well, just like it happened against Rutgers. Again, he should have taken the shot. He made the right decision. He took the shot, knew immediately it wasn't going in, and I think that's the most important thing here. Because he charged hard at the rim. Like, there's chasing, and then there's what that was, right? Like, he was going full bore. He was determined that Penn State was getting that rebound somehow. And he said after the game that he was trying to tip it to Winner underneath, because he saw Winner, who was in the dunker, and stepped forward to try and get the offensive rebound. From looking at photos, it didn't look like he got the ball. It looked like he got, like, the back of hands. But the momentum of him coming in, like, pushed the ball, you know what I mean, down toward Winner, even if he didn't get a hand on it. I've seen some people say that should have been a foul. Nobody's calling a foul. Nobody in their right mind is calling a foul there, right? It is a moot point.
Not a chance.
We've talked about officiating before. Even these officials aren't making that call, right? Like, and he whatever, momentum it caused, like he pushed the ball, or pushed hands, whatever he pushed, perfectly down to Cam Winter, who was right under the rim, went up, didn't touch glass, didn't touch I don't even think it touched the rim, went straight down in. And then the roof blew off the BJC, right? Like, this was the loudest I'd heard that building all year. No students were there, by the way. Or, I shouldn't say that. There were some students who came. There was no true student section because it's spring break. It was the start of spring break. That was still one of the loudest. Given the circumstances, it was the loudest. But had students been there, it would have easily been the loudest that arena had been all year. And it went nuts, right? Like, it was this thing like... So my job, part of my job, is being objective. Right, not having a rooting interest either way, and I don't. Like, that is not my job. I always say, like, I root for a good story, admittedly, pretty good story to write after that one. But I reacted, like, and so did other beat writers, because it was like this oh shit moment, right? Like, you just realize what happens, and I was like immediately, like, my hands went back. You know what I mean? Like the reaction you have when someone does something crazy like that, and they were down 16 in the first half, 15 late in the second half, or early in the second half, and like you said, it's the resilience. It was the resilience once again, and that, to me, it's the team's resilience, it's Winter's resilience, it's Lundy's resilience, it's all of it. And, like, Sunday was the perfect, like, amalgamation of all of it coming together into the same thing, like, into being, like, this is who this team is in the regular season finale.
Yeah, for me, too, like, you see what this team has been through since the beginning of the season. Everything, the ups and downs, the bad losses, the amazing wins that we saw early, all right, we're headed in the right direction, the 2-3 losses in a row, then the 2 big wins in a row, and now we talk about the end of the season, how they won 2 big games that they had to win to basically put themselves at the best chance of making the NCAA tournament. It's almost to the point to where for me, when I've always said that, like, when I make shots and they're like, oh man, I banked it in, or hit the rim a certain amount of times, I always say, people be like, oh yeah, Tim, you living right. And I believe, like, I think Penn State basketball, those guys, especially Cam Winter, has been living right. And I don't know if it's waking up in the morning and getting extra shots and going to class and taking care of business in the classroom and getting enough sleep, if eating the right food. I think a lot of that plays in a part. I'm not necessarily big on superstition, but the team is living right. Obviously it's not going to go, the train's not going to go smoothly like all the time, but for this team now, they're living right. And, hopefully they're going to continue to keep living right, especially when now we talk about the Big Ten tournament and then hopefully in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah. And you mentioned winning those 2. It's not just those 2. It's winning 5 of their last 6, right? I remember when you and I talked, I believe it was right after the first Maryland game. It might have been after. Yeah, it was because it was before Illinois, and we talked about, what this looks like the rest of the way, right? How, like, you don't want to put the final nail in the coffin, but, like, they got to win 5 of the next 6 to do it. And I was ready to put the nail, and then you look at the schedule, it's like, okay, well, maybe if things go right, and outside of Rutgers, everything went right. And by the way, I hate to do this, people, I think if they had beaten Rutgers, they would be the 6th seed in the Big Ten tournament, which is a little bit better than being the 10th seed. And they would be locked in, but you can't go back and change that now. I do think it's going to be an interesting thing to look back on, though, down the road, like, depending on how this all shakes out. But yeah, like, it all went right for them, right? Like, everything kind of fell in their favor when it seemed like the last 4 games before that, the opposite was the case, right? Like, it seemed like nothing was going right for them. They couldn't get things to fall. And I talked to people, trying to get a feel for what changed. I asked Mike in his press conference. I asked Funk when I sat down with him. I asked Cam when I sat down with him. And, like, a lot of people just point to the fact that they stayed steady, right? And I think that was something Micah learned about this team, too. I mentioned that I didn't think he handled some of the losses well, that Wisconsin one specifically. I didn't think he handled well, or, I thought he overreacted in his post-game press conference. I think that was the case a couple other times this year. But I think he learned his team through that process, right? Through him basically doing the wrong thing, he learned the right thing. And it allowed him to kind of treat this group how it has to be treated, in that, like, these are some old dudes, man. They've played a lot of basketball, right? A lot of 22, 23-year-olds. And in college, that is old. Mikey Henn, I think, is 25. This is what feels like year 36 for him in college basketball. But, these guys know what it takes. They know what they need to do. And so, like, maybe it's less of the rah-rah and more of the, like, let these guys handle it. They got it. And And they did have it, right? Like, Funk has had ups and downs this season, and to close the season, he was excellent. Lundy has had ups and downs the last few games, but he got you to this point, and he was an excellent defender even when he wasn't playing well offensively, right? Even when maybe the decision making was off and maybe some of the shots weren't falling, he was still doing all of the right things defensively. He was still playing hard. He wasn't passing up good shots and gumming up the offense or anything like that. He was doing all of the right things still. And yeah, I just think like you said, I think you're living right is a good way to put it, because it did feel like they were living right? Like they just kind of hit on everything they needed to, which leads us into the next step of all of this, right? And we can get into the scouting report now for Illinois. This is a team Penn State's seen twice and beat twice, and kind of felt like they were never losing either of those two games, right? Like the away game 74-59, the home game 93-81. It's a good Illinois team. Like, I'm not saying that it's not. It's just a team that it seems like Penn State has the number. I know everyone does it's hard to beat a team 3 times. Yes, and also no, right? Like, it's hard to do at the outset, but once you win the first 2, the third one isn't any harder than the first or the second, right? Like, it doesn't,
right.
Once you get to this point, all that goes out the window. Like, now, if you go at the beginning of the season, be like, oh, they need to win all 3. Yes, that's different. But
right.
But as where we're standing right now, like, I haven't looked at any odds or anything for this game. But Ken Pom has this projected as a 1-point loss for Penn State. I don't know, man. I think they're going to win this game, and I think it'll probably be closer than the first 2, but the way they play, they can take away some of the transition opportunities that Illinois needs from Terrence Shannon to get going. And frankly, I know this is oversimplification of it a little bit, but Penn State has the best player on the court. That's the case in most games, but it's especially true in this game, and it mattered a lot the first 2 times around.
Yeah, of course. But John, I wanted to make sure I put this in a pod this week. It was obviously I wanted to give credit to Miles Dredd, because I think that's big for him on senior night, how he played against Maryland. Man, that was huge. Like you said, he's had to take a step back and what he's been doing since his career there, and being able to still stay ready and stay confident and be able to help the team, especially when they needed it in a must-win game. And you could see the emotions from him after the game as well, about how, I had talked to you about the week before about how many emotions run as being a senior, how tears come out of your eyes, how you have so many things you could just tell that he was happy and sad at the same time, because he know that his time here at Penn State was coming to an end, but he gave it his all throughout his career, and you could see the tears running and how much it meant to him. And as a player, for a school that, man, I think from when I was saying last week about how much you just felt so thankful, I saw that in him. Like how thankful he was to everybody and for helping him through his years there at Penn State. So I just wanted to make sure we put him in as well, because obviously those other guys did play well, but for him, man, that's huge to be able to stand up as a senior and, especially when your role is diminished some, and continue to stay ready and help a team win a must-win game.
Yeah, and he didn't just help, right? When they were kind of down in the dumps, he was the one willing to take those big shots. And Micah Shrewsbury spoke after the game on the court. He talked about each senior. He took the mic, spoke to the crowd, and said, one of the things he said about Miles, anytime they need something, it's always "I got you" from Miles to him, right? He's always Miles is always ready in those situations, and it's really interesting. There are plenty of journalists out there who've been doing this much longer than I have. I'm only 28, right? I've covered college basketball for 5 years, 4th year covering Penn State. And you see guys come and go a little bit, right? You get to know them a little bit. Yeah. I got to know Lamar a little bit when he was here. Sam Sessoms was here for a couple of years, got to know him. But Seth Lundy and Miles Dredd are kind of the two guys that Miles was in his second year when I first got here, and Seth was in his first year when I first got here. And so those are guys that, for me, they're the first group of guys that I've seen go on the whole journey, right? And so again, it's not my job to have a rooting interest, but you get to know people, right? And you enjoy seeing people have success that you get to know and that have kind of earned that success. And you can empathize with someone when you're around them so much, right? During basketball season, they see us, I'm sure, too much and see my face too much. As much as you have to, quite frankly, at this point. And so you get to know those guys, and you see him. So I was up in press row. I waited, where it's at, up halfway up the arena, and I was looking down at everything, and you see Miles he talked to Mike Farrell. He's getting emotional. He's crying. He's doing the interview, and he's crying. And you look at Micah Shrewsbury, and he's crying, right? These clearly there was so much weight on everyone's shoulders going into this stretch, and to see those guys get emotional, like, you know, you just kind of, it's a cool scene to see, right? To see how much people care about something like this, because obviously it means everything to them right now, you know, and for good reason. But it was really cool to see, and then to talk to Miles afterward, and to, you know, those for probably the last time in the Bryce Jordan Center, talking to him at, you know, at a press conference, and seeing him, you know, start to cry when Mike is talking about him, and seeing like all of the realness. I'm very big on authenticity, and like Miles in those moments was as authentic as he could be, right? Like there was no, I don't think he tried to hold it back, right? Like I don't think there's any reason to either, but like seeing him work through that emotion and feel through it, it was something to behold. You know, it was like you said, for a guy whose role has been diminished, for a guy who frankly like hasn't played as well probably as he would want to, and I think he'd probably tell you that too. To have the biggest game of his senior season in their biggest game, in what I called in my story that probably the biggest or second biggest moment in program history outside of Taylor Battle's coast-to-coast layup in 2009 against Illinois. Because that layup, by the way, that layup was supposed to also put them in the NCAA tournament the year before you got there, but it didn't, and they went to the NIT and ended up winning the NIT that year. This, again, there are some parallels here. I don't want to put the cart before the horse on getting an NCAA tournament, but, you know, this might be something to that we could talk about. But like, it was really cool though. It was you're happy for him, you're happy for the people, you know, that you get to know and everything like that. Like we're all human, right? Like I don't turn into a robot just because I'm a journalist. Like you empathize with people and everything like that. And it was really cool to see. And I'm glad you brought that up because we'd been remiss had we not talked about, you know, how important he was, not just from a culture standpoint this year in keeping things steady, but also from a on-court standpoint in that game, right? Like he was as important as it gets. And he's, frankly, like he might be just as important against Illinois because when Keba Jai is maybe not playing as well, which, by the way, has also not been the case for the last 2 weeks, and I think his development is something we'll definitely talk about in the offseason. When Evan Mahafy's in foul trouble, when Mikey Henn's not hitting shots, like they don't have a true big to go to. They put Miles out there, and he takes a beating against like some enormous dudes, right? Like he is not 7 feet tall like they are, and he's having to deal with these guys, these enormous players backing him down and trying to move him, and he's got to fight back the entire time. Like playing defense in the post is taxing. I think that gets lost on people sometimes. Like it really wears on you, and he's done it, and he's just done it game in and game out, and he's done it willingly. And he might have to do that against Dane Danger in Illinois. Like he might have to do it, you know, if they get further against teams like Northwestern and Indiana. But like I don't want to necessarily call it a sacrifice because I think it's getting him on the court, right? He's just kind of doing what he has to do to help the team out and get on the court. But on some level, he's had to sacrifice, right? Changing his role probably more than anyone. And he's taken it all in stride. And I think if you're a Penn State fan, if you're a Penn State coach, if you're within the program, that's really all you can ask for. But that Illinois game, like, is crucial because you look at the bracket when it gets finalized. We talked a lot about like how weird it was, like everything was like jumping around and everything. And then you look how it turns out. So Penn State plays Illinois Thursday at 6:30 Eastern time, 5:30 Central in Chicago. If they win that, they play Northwestern, who they just beat on the road a week ago. If they win that, they're most likely to play Indiana, a team they've had a ton of success against the last few times they played them. When if it's not Indiana, then it's Maryland, who they literally beat 4 days ago, right? So, or 2 days ago, whatever it was. Time is moving very slowly right now, in case you couldn't tell. It's been a long couple days, but like that side of the bracket couldn't be going better for them. Like there is I'm not going to say this is going to happen, to be clear. There is a world though where they're playing on Sunday. Like, and I don't think it's all that crazy, and it may seem crazy because it's a 10 seed we're talking about. There's also a world, by the way, where Thursday's their last game, and we'll talk about that here in a second. But like, I'm not rolling that out either. Yeah, I just think there's so much variability within the conference this year that 11 seed Nebraska could also be the team that they might have to face in the semifinals, right? If they get there, because Nebraska has been on fire too. So I just think the way this is played out, frankly, from a story standpoint, from my perspective, has been, and from a team standpoint, from their perspective, and, people like yourself who used to be in the program and like are dedicated, watching constantly and keeping track of this team, like it kind of couldn't have turned out any better, I don't think.
Yeah. I say the words, man. The team is living right. When you ask for the bracket and how things worked out, obviously you want to get those a double bye, and not having to play until, was that Friday? Yeah. But it is what it is, and the team gets some likable games that they've played against teams where they beat everybody they probably have to face. They beat. And I know you mentioned earlier about, the whole superstition about it's hard to beat a team 3 times in a row. I do think it's that. I do think it's hard to beat a team 3 times in a row. But it's hard to beat a team 3 times in a row in the playoffs, in the NBA playoffs, when you're seeing them every day, every other day. Yeah. I think that's hard trying to beat. But there's been breaks in between them. I think Penn State stunned them, stunned Illinois at Illinois. And then I think Illinois was ready when they came to Penn State, but the Penn State was they felt confident. The confidence was built. They played well. They were able to beat them again. So I think now we talk about a neutral site. I'm hoping and I'm assuming there's going to be a lot of Penn State fans that are going to make the travel because they know how big this game is. And, because I remember when our NCAA tournament run, man, we had a good group of fans that came out and supported us. They were at the games, and after that, they were at the hotel when we came back. So we kind of need that as well because we know how big this game is going to be for Penn State basketball because, you and I have been talking about it. I think you win one, you're in. Especially they win this game, they're in. So it's there. It's there for the taking, and the team has been living right. Hopefully, like I said, they continue to keep living right, and when they go out to Chicago and handle business. And then from there, just how for us, the year we went to the NCAA tournament, we beat I think we might have beat Illinois first. I'm not sure. Then we played Wisconsin, which was the craziest low-scoring game of the year. It was like 34-32. Everybody was like, how did you do that? And then we won, and then from there we went Michigan State. And we beat Michigan State, had one of my kind of breakout games. And then from there, we ran into, the Ohio State, and they did with everybody. I think Diebler had like 10 threes on it, something crazy.
I think that was the game that he set the record.
Right. It was something crazy. I think we when I remember Taylor and I, because we were roommates, I remember us sitting there, it was like, man, we can get him. And we kind of they just got so hot early to the point to where we were realizing we was like, man, well, we keep chipping away. That's all we could continue to do. But obviously Ohio State ended up winning and going far. But this team, the bracket is set up for them to take it, like you said, and make it to Sunday. They just have to take care of the business first. And the first order of business is to beat Illinois.
Well, and their biggest disadvantage as far as like trying to make it a true neutral site is how close Chicago is to the University of Illinois, right? Yeah. But to push back on that a tiny bit, I do think it's probably going to be an Illinois crowd there. Yeah. But there are direct flights from Chicago or from State College to Chicago. I would know. This is one that I have to use a lot to get to plenty of places doing this job. And so there's a little bit easier access. And Micah Shrewsbury brought up a great point in these tournament settings where if you play exciting basketball or if you for whatever reason can do something to get the crowd on your side, because like at that game there are going to be some there. There are other teams there, so like there are going to be Maryland fans there and then either Minnesota or Nebraska fans there. Maybe those Maryland fans aren't going to be rooting for Penn State after what happened on Sunday, but if whoever they're playing has some fans there, or maybe a fan is just there watching holdover from Iowa, Wisconsin, whatever, you can get some team or some fans to kind of cheer for. You can maybe even that crowd out a little bit. That being said, crowd didn't bother him too much in Champaign the first go-around. Don't know if it's going to be too much of an issue this time around either. I think it's a game they can win, but I mean, that you mentioned it already, but we can take it to the word on campus. I think, and I think I might be alone on this. I've talked to some people who agree a little bit. I think Penn State might be in no matter what, and I don't want to come off as having a hot take or anything like that, but they're 19-12. They're 10-10 in the hardest conference in the country. And I don't know if it's particularly close at this point, especially, from a depth standpoint. They have one of the best players in the country, and they have a ton of impressive wins, right? This is not them beating up on Minnesota and Nebraska constantly. They took care of business against teams like that. I think they have one quad 3 loss currently, and it was the loss to Wisconsin at home, which really isn't that bad. Like it's not a loss like the committee's going to look at and be like, oh, that's damning. Like that'll knock them out of it. I don't think that's the case. Like their wins lately have been excellent too, beating again Illinois on the road and at home, beating an Ohio State team that looks much better, by the way. Penn State caught that Ohio State team on the front end of them looking really, really good. And I think if they catch them like 3 days later, things change. Or maybe that was just like the beginning of it and Penn State was good enough. Who knows? But again, they catch Ohio State when Ohio State's playing well and still beat them. That Rutgers loss is going to sting for some people, but that's not that bad of a loss. That's a good Rutgers team. Circumstances aside, like a 3-point loss to Rutgers isn't that big of a deal. Northwestern is the 2 seed in the Big Ten tournament. They just beat them on the road. Maryland is the 6 seed and a lock to make the NCAA tournament. They just beat them at home with a ridiculous comeback. Wins over Indiana, win over Michigan, win over Iowa. Like, they have a good win over a Furman team. We talked about this at the beginning of the year before we started publishing everything, that like that Furman team's good, right? And Furman just won their conference championship with a 27-7 record. Like, they're not a pushover by any stretch. And Penn State got a good win down there in Charleston, winning that game. So I do think like the resume is there. I am not one to say like that there's going to be bias from the selection committee with brand recognition. I might say it if North Carolina gets in over Penn State, because North Carolina's resume just does not stack up. But I think that would be the, stuff happens sometimes and things get weird and committee members are looking for certain things that maybe, Penn State doesn't have whatever that stacks up well against team X, Y, or Z or what have you. Like, different people have different criteria. I understand that. And at the end of the day, these are humans. They make the wrong decisions sometimes. But as things stand, I think if they lose, I think they're probably in Dayton. I'm not an expert on this, but this is just based on looking at the resume. I think if they lose, they're in Dayton. If they win, they're probably not in the first 4 anymore. Like, they're looking at a true 10 seed, which, gotta tell you, man, 2 weeks ago, didn't think that was going to happen.
No, I'm with you. I do believe that this team is in. I think regardless, win or loss. But I just think that you don't put it in the committee's hands. And, I've learned that from, or, if you look at the Penn State teams before, like you said, the team before I got there, when Taylor Battle makes the layup against Illinois, everybody's saying the same thing. They're for sure in, this and this and that. And you just don't put it in their hands. But I do believe this year, I think having Pickett as an All-American is a boost. The team playing some of the best basketball it can play right now, and people have seen it. Like, it's been covered all across the country now. Everybody's seen the 2 game-winning shots for the last week, so that plays a part. So, like you said, we're talking about humans that are making this decision. They're seeing that. Okay, his team has like when you look at the whipped cream on top, the All-American, the 2 game winners playing the best basketball right now, and a team that's people have been saying that they deserve to be an NCAA tournament team. This is not somebody this team that just all of a sudden they just went on a stretch and now we're like, are they? No, they've been predicted to be in the tournament for the longest. So I do believe that they're in. I think, like you said, if they do lose, I think they're not going to still make it all the way in. They're going to be, like you said, the first 4, and they're going to have to play to get in the tournament for sure, because we don't have the resume and the background of making an NCAA tournament. So you're going to go with, they're going to be like, all right, let's put them in the first 4, see what they can do. But I do see that if they win, I see them winning the next one and continue to go. And who knows how far they can get up and make it into and how high seed they can get there if they take it all the way to Sunday. Because you never know. Because at the end of the day, these are humans. They're going to see how well they're playing, and they're going to be like, well, this team is playing the hottest basketball they've been playing all year. And there's no other team that's hotter than them in the country if you talk about them winning the next 3 games in a tournament all the way up into Sunday.
Yeah, and listen, if they make it to Sunday, I don't really know what seed they're going to be.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I think it all goes out the window at that point. Like, I think you'd probably reasonably put them as a 7 or an 8, right? If they're winning, that would be what? If, let's say they lose Sunday, they would have won 8 of their last 10 games, and against good teams. Like I said, I think that's the point where it gets weird. And then any projection I do, I'm just done. Like, I'm just waiting until someone else tells me where they're going to play so I can book my travel and be done with it. Because, like, they're for sure in, like I said, if they win on Thursday. But that kind of run, like, that's a season changer, right? And I think it's possible. Yeah. Like, we talked about it earlier. I think it's possible. I don't think it's funny. You and I have talked about the NCAA tournament for 5 months now, right? 4 months now. I don't think everyone else did. I think they've been on the radar for the for the broad majority of the season. But before the season, I don't think it was talked about all that much. I think, by the way, we may both have projected 10-10, so I'm just throwing that out there. 10-10 in conference, so kudos to us if we did that. If we didn't, I'll just forget that it happened and pretend that I did. Simple as that. But no, I think like we've talked about this, and I think it's because internally the NCAA tournament was the expectation. And you talk to people around the program, that never wavered. That was never not the goal this year. They always wanted to make the NCAA tournament, and I think they're right on the doorstep. Like in Illinois, whenever Illinois pushes them in, no matter what. Lose that game, maybe it's a little dicey, but I think they get it anyways. And this is maybe there are other conversations to be had then about retaining your head coach and interest from other schools in your head coach. But that is not the discussion to have for right now, right? Like, I think this is a really fun time for me personally to cover this team, right? Like, I've been saying I just want to cover the NCAA tournament this is my 5th year. Like I said, I covered Indiana for a year, Penn State for 3 before this one. Like, I just want to cover an NCAA tournament. It seems like a lot of fun. It seems like everyone else is having a lot of fun doing it. I'd like to be a part of that. For fans, for, former players like yourself, like, I think this is the most fun season in all likelihood from that perspective since Lamar's season. And that couldn't have ended worse, right? Like, it all was taken away. I don't think that's going to be the case. Hopefully we don't have another global pandemic on the doorstep. If we do, someone please let me know so I can change my travel plans. But like,
I think, but I do say, I think if we do have it, I think they're still having an NCAA tournament.
So. That might be true this time around. But yeah, no, it's like, this is a fun team with good players, with a great player on top of that in Jalen Pickett that plays an excellent brand of basketball, and I think that plays a brand of basketball that's built for March. And all of that goes to say that if they get in, I'll go on the record now, I think they got a pretty good shot of making the Sweet 16. It depends on the matchups. It depends on how things go. I was about to say. But like, I know this is the type of roster build that you look at that it's like, oh shit, how'd that 10 seed get in the Sweet 16? It's elite guard play. It's a lot of high variance play. It's a lot of shooting. It's a lot of threes. And it's having one of the best, or the best player on the court. And again, they're going to play a lot of teams. They're mostly going to have the best player on the court. I think when you run into trouble is if that's ever not true, right? Like, there's a reason Purdue gives them so much trouble. Zach Edey's better than Jalen Pickett. Like, just point blank, he is. Jalen is excellent, and he's an All-American. Zach Edey's the National Player of the Year, right? Like, he is the best player in college basketball when it comes to college basketball. And, that stuff. But I think more often than not, they're going to have the best player on the court. They're going to play a type of basketball that wins in March. And, the officiating will change a little. Won't be Big Ten officials. It might be a little more favorable.
I'm not saying it's not possible, because I do believe, like you said, when you're in a tournament setting, it's the hottest team. Whoever's the hottest team, it's gonna win the games. But I do believe it's all about the draw, like you said.
100%.
Who you play against. You can, we've seen it. I remember I forgot who I was giving one of my old teammates a hard time when Virginia was the number 1 team in the country and then they lost. To
UMBC.
Yes. Things happen, and it's crazy. And I think a lot of it is just based on a draw. We've seen how Purdue, teams with big bigs, with great bigs, it's tough for Penn State to really stay locked in and stay against them, because they're trying to, change their plans when it comes to defending a big and how the players that they use on the court. So if they don't run into anything like that, and it's literally based on guard playing threes, I don't see any team like I don't watch enough outside of the Big Ten and in the top 25 to really know what's really going on the outside. But I don't see, like you said, Pickett will be one of the best guards. I know there's some other guards that are All-Americans as well, but he'll be the biggest. I do know that, be the biggest All-American guard. And we go from there. You got 3-4 shooters all around him. Cam Winters playing the best basketball he can play. The young freshmen and the young bigs are playing hard, doing all the loose ball. I mean, you can't ask for anything else than that, than them going out there. And at the end of the day, they're playing with house money. House money. The goal was to make the NCAA tournament. And from there, you go from, what do you want to do? You huddle, you guys make it a tournament, you see the seed, you guys huddle up and say, what are we trying to do? Are we here just to be happy about making it? Are we going in there to make some noise? And I think that should be the goal. Let's make some noise and, let the chips fall where they may. Final Four, championship, Sweet 16, Elite 8, who knows, 32. But you got to go out there and just believe that you're going to be able to just make some noise. And I think that will be my game plan from what they, when they make it. That's, when they make it into the tournament.
I appreciate the when on there.
Yes.
But yeah, no, I think you're right. Like, and like I said, this is just the kind of team that's built for the NCAA tournament. I know it may seem like a hot take, but I really don't think it is. That this is just the kind of play that works. That being said, there are 2 teams, if I'm Penn State, that I don't want to face in either the first or the second round. It is impossible for them to face Purdue in the first round, so they don't have to worry about that. But Purdue is one of those teams that, like, if Penn State ends up as a 10 seed, like, you don't want the 2 seed in that region to beat Purdue, because you are not going to have a good time in the second round. The other team is a weird one. It is Oral Roberts. And hear me out on this. Max Asmus went nuts a few years ago for Oral Roberts. They have 7'5" Connor Vanover is their second best player. Not going to work. It's not going to go well. And A. Smith himself is like on the level of Pickett. Like I included him. I have, so for the USBWA, I have an All-American vote, and like A. Smith to me is a third-team All-American. You don't separate it by teams, but I had him where I would have had a third-team All-American. And so you have those level of guys, right? Like it is, if you get a 7-5 guy, it's not going to go well. Fortunately, there are not many of them. But yeah, it's like, outside of those two draws, like the rest of it's like, yeah, sure, why not, right? Like this team can hang with anyone, especially if they get hot, and they can beat anyone if they get hot, and that's the most important thing. But this was quite the trip, right? Like it's been a crazy year. It is, and it ended as crazy as it possibly could have. And I think it's only going to get more fun. I hope people enjoyed listening to us today, because these are the kind of podcasts for me personally that, when I listen to like an Eagles podcast, like after the win, like you really look forward to, what I mean, to listen to it. I hope people got that sense of enjoyment and have that sense of excitement out of, what's to come here. But I think that's a good place to leave it for this week. You can find us, as always, on YouTube, where if you are watching us, where you're probably seeing us right now at Beyond Big Ten. You can find us on Twitter, on Instagram, on TikTok at Beyond the Big Ten. You can find us wherever podcasts are, wherever you're listening now, presumably. It is also there. You can find Tim on Twitter at TimFraze23. You can find me on Twitter at Jon Sauber. Thank you for tuning in. Have a great day.
Beyond the Big Ten is a network of podcasts that aims to be your go-to resource for all things Big Ten. We cover the entire conference with shows hosted by ex-players and athletic alumni, aiming to be your go-to source of information and entertainment for your favorite team. Hosted by ex-Big Ten players, media, and insiders, our podcasts are focused on giving diehard fans and those alums an inside scoop about the teams and people that make the Big Ten Conference one of the most watched and most talked about conferences in sports. We're excited to talk Big Ten basketball with you wherever you may be. Subscribe now.